All right, welcome back to our monthly AI podcast. And this is where the fun time of the month, I would say. I get to interact with my um, with fellow enthusiasts. And welcome on board, Lucas.
Thank you for
We are,
having me, as always. It's a
yep, yep.
pleasure.
And we are doing from different continents, but uh, again, we will be doing this in two parts. So the first part, I think this is with you, Lucas. I
hmm
know the last time we kind of moved into this six category or six bucket category because
hmm
there are things are changing quite a bit, and we wanted to kind of bring in all these different categories and see what makes sense to discuss. So, as always, I would like to start with all these different categories like the applications and agents or platform and orchestration. I know all these six categories, whether it is the context, tools and data, models and compute, or trust, evals and observability, and finally the AI economics. These are the six different categories that we
hmm
started building and talking about what happened in the last month, I think in the month of April.
hmm
So which is the particular category? I know a lot is happening out there. Which is the particular category you want to first get started with, and then we can take it from there.
I'm happy to start from the top because I think still agents and applications are still a very easy way to segue into other conversations. And I was recently working on strategy topics. And so I was thinking there's so much noise around agents.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to formulate what's going on. And I think there is a slightly abstruse and really strange analogy that I can tell, but I think it will be fun for the listeners to keep in mind. So, there is something in biology which is called convergent evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it mean? It means that different species end up looking the same. And that's not typically how we think of evolution, right? Normally, if you think about,
Right.
let's say, the great apes and like Homo sapiens and, Homo ludens, like all these kind of things, like they would like split up and different species would have like a common ancestor. But it can also turn out that the pressures of the environment like recreate essentially the same species or shape different species into one shape. And that's particular, or one good example of it is the crabs. You would think that, like, those like sea dwelling little heteropods that like run around with their claws and everything, that they would be all one species. But it turns out it's nature has found multiple ways of creating a crab.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought this is like an interesting analogy. Why? Because we see that currently all of the agent ideas converge on one product surface, and it will make sense in a second.
Right.
At the beginning of the year, and we talked last time about it, the first really viral, like real big agent use case that I would say most people have heard of is OpenClaw, right?
Right. Right.
Open claw like a crab, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
lobster or like any type of crab. And it feels like that other products are converging to the same product surface. What do I mean by that? Perplexity started as a search engine that's
Mm-hmm.
powered by AI. Now they have computer use. Now they have like independent agent loops. They have like all of the criteria that you would think of as typical for an AI agent. Same is true for Claude Code. It used to be just an AI, then a coding tool. Now it has Dispatch, so you can use the phone and like just like Telegram or like other messaging apps. Dispatch also lets you talk to your AI. It has pretty much the same functionalities of some sort of persistent memory, an agent loop, some tool usage, and it doesn't matter whether it's a AI company, a search company, or various other IT companies, it seems like everybody's converging on the same lobster design, so convergent evolution. And I think that to me is an interesting signal. It feels like we haven't yet fully mastered like how agents can be made productive, but now this concept of harness engineering, namely what it takes for an AI to be channeled in a way so that the agent can really create the interesting work increments, like do the real work, deliver artifacts, not be just a tool.
Right.
And I think for me, that is in the terms of agents and applications. It feels like a lot of the very fast and interesting companies
Mm-hmm.
have line of sight in terms of where they're heading. And that to me is exciting because it means that we will, under convergent evolution, if my theory is correct, that we will see a really interesting couple of next months. So that's for, let's say, applications and agents. My observation of the month that I feel like there is like a convergent evolution happening with agents, and that will mean that we will see a lot more imitation, a lot more systems that look alike, but also more like rapid acceleration of evolution in that space.
Right, right. I think that's a great analogy and a great take that you have brought. I think that the approach, the crab approach, when we talk about how many of these AI companies or search companies or even enterprise companies, they are there's like a mad race towards building these agents in the form of like open claw or crab, which is where things are. I believe things are heating up so fast. I think I would say that this month, I think specifically, I would see that with the release of Cloud, I think the latest model, I think they really raised a bar, right? I think for coding and agent workflows and other things. Uh,
Yeah.
I would say any many of these headlines, if you see, I think I'm pretty sure now OpenAI will come up with another competitive agent or the competitive model out of that. Of course, we are not yet talking about the models, but I think I'm getting pulled into that when we talk about agents.
Mm.
So with that, I would like to maybe let's get into another aspect. I think we've talked about the agents. I think there's a right. Maybe we can get into the aspect of models and compute because that is one thing which can uh, logically get into this, right? I think
Sure.
I would say the compute arms race has really, really grown in
I
April. I
think,
think whether it is the models that are released in China from DeepSeek or whether Meta coming out with this new model. So, is there any take, or do you want to provide some thoughts around models and compute? Because now that
yeah,
we talked about that.
I'm sure the others will have very interesting tidbits about models, and maybe we'll talk about Mythos, the new anthropic model that was held back. And I think there will be a lot of conversation whether this is a pattern that we will see in the future again, meaning you have to pay money to get in front of the line, and not everybody will have automatic access to the best technology because it is an inversion of what we are used to, because the economics of building software were that essentially all the costs were front loaded, so
Hmm.
everything was a capex expenditure. Even if you had developers, in some sense, because the marginal costs used to be zero, everything was a capex. So even like what per definition, like
Right.
labor expenses and salaries were like opex, were like lumped into capex because you had the one, let's say,
Yeah.
lump sum at the beginning to build your software, and then like essentially it was flat and free. But now, because models are very different, of course, they have insane amounts of capex to train a model. But then you also have substantial amounts of opex, meaning running the model is quite expensive. That all of a sudden, like pricing models that are different will come to fruition again, or will re-enter the room. And things like exclusivity or people just buying up tokens before anybody else, I think those are things we will see. But I didn't want to talk too much about that because I think other people will
Mm-hmm,
talk
mm-hmm,
about it. I think for me, what's interesting about models and computer is a couple of observations that are maybe more principled. So right now, we are still in the era of barely, let's say, David Blackwell. That's in terms of the NVIDIA technology.
mm-hmm,
They started at some point, I don't know exactly when, they started calling their pods, so their data center setup, or they called them after like researchers, right? And allegedly Mythos is the first David Blackwell. But we will have Vera Rubin by the end of the year, or not by the end of the year, we'll have Vera Rubin run on a model by the end of the year. So you will have a 20 to 50x improvement in terms of cost and performance for the model. So even if nothing else happens,
mm-hmm.
we'll get this year, at the end of the year, one more model that's not just like Mythos, but it is one step as big as, let's say, the GPT-5 class models compared to Mythos. We'll get another jump of that size. And we already know that Richard Feynman is coming online next year, most likely, unless there's like catastrophic logistic chain disruptions and whatnot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is kind of humbling when you know, like, okay, just the boring scaling that is done is good enough for the next two iterations, and we'll see at least one more this year. But I think what's also really important is people talk about it in terms of like an inflated bubble and how everything is like overheated and it cannot be sustainable. And then I'm like, as we tape this, we're just in the week of the hyperscalers releasing their Q1 numbers.
True.
And for the lack of a better word, they're on a fountain of money. They're literally printing money. Their revenue is off the charts.
Right.
So you have a double in capex expenditure that is already like put out there. The lead times are years for data centers. We're investing more than ever before, and it's by companies that are making money, and their multiples are lower than any other bubble before. If you see like, oh, it's like the dot-com bubble. Well, the multipliers were in terms of like earnings and losses and over time, they were like not near what we're currently seeing. So I feel like the crazy part is not that Mythos exists. The crazy part is not like what's going on with this model. The crazy part is that we know we will get at least
At
two or three
least.
more iterations, even if now stuff cools down and we go a little bit slower on this entire thing. So that to me is like the really crazy part about the models and the economics behind it.
Right, right. So, like you said, I think we will discuss more about the models with the others. So, I would like to then pivot a bit into the other category, maybe the category of context, tools, and data, if that makes sense. Or do you want to pick up another category which you want to discuss in the month of April that really uh, kind of echoed a lot for you apart from
Yeah.
this?
So I think we totally should talk about context tools and data, but then
Mhm,
I kind of my like soapbox this year seems to be the economics, because I feel like we're still
mhm,
misaligned on the incentives. So the AI economics, I think, are where I see most of the people expect this to be boring, but I think there's a lot happening that will supercharge everything else. But let's go to context tools and data. I think what right now happening, what's happening in terms of tools shouldn't be underestimated. Why? We started the conversation with agents.
Mm-hmm.
Now, very recently, Salesforce came out with a message uh, that they would offer Salesforce as a headless service. So, what that
Right.
means is that you offer your entire SaaS product in a version without a UI that is specifically targeted for agentic use cases. Now, on the one hand side, I applaud them on being like so early to the market with that and realizing that this is um, inevitable for their market or for their position. It also, I think, is a much bigger deal than people might think because Salesforce was very bullish about their agents, right? Like their own suite of agentic capabilities. And to me, this move towards headless means some sort of a kowtow of the reality of the market, saying like, hey, maybe we will not be the ones who can own the agent layer as well, even if we were early, if we tried hard and we wanted to succeed, simply because we need to stick to what we're good at. And the agent race is just in terms of war of attrition, it's just for the big boys. It's for the frontier labs, and it's the pockets are not big and deep enough. Um, what I would say, the takeaway is less for me about Salesforce and let's say who wins with the agent race. I think for me, the reality is that this is not like a fancy of some developers or companies. It's clear that agentic use cases are seeing traction, they see adoption, they're important. A big company would not cede so much strategic territory if it weren't clear to them that this needs to happen and they have a role to play. Now, when I use my own agentic tools, what I see is if I work with, let's say, OpenClaw, right? Um, it's almost like it's a complete shift in loyalty. What I mean by that is I, as me personally, I have a certain set of SaaS applications that I'm quite comfortable with, right? That I've used
Mm-hmm.
for a long time, and I will not like name any specifics, but choose your poison in terms of like file storage or like the things you use every day. You know, when I use an agent to automate one of my personal use cases, I completely throw overboard like all of my allegiance and loyalty to any of those services. And all I ask is there a good CLI? Do they have an MCP service? Like, what is their offering towards agents? And if the answer is bad, then I'm like, you're commodity. I'm gone. I'm going to wherever the same service is rendered with and product surface that's easily consumable and usable by an agent. And I think that's a big deal because normally it takes a lot to
Mm.
change the preferences of consumers because it's like I would say 99% of the stuff we use online is good enough. We're happy with our setup, right? We're not like pained by how it works. Most of the stuff is, it just works. But now with agents, I feel like just like in the B2C space, we'll see also in the B2B space, if you're not there, like Salesforce and companies that realize they have to put out a consumable interface for agents, I think companies will be surprised how fledgling the loyalty of agents is. Or what I mean by that is like how easily allegiances can be changed when agents come into the pictures. So that to me in the tool space is something that really came home this month and that I thought was really interesting.
Right. I think that's a very interesting. I think it was a very interesting statement as well. And like you mentioned, I think I think maybe Mark was ahead of his time again. I think he realized that, okay, it's not that that there may not be one company which will dominate the agents in that space. And I think the way I think things are happening would be like, how do you open it up and how you can, like you said, it's very easy to pivot between different agents and how well you can interoperably work between different agents wherever it is coming in from and make it depending on the context or depending on
Mhm.
what you are trying to accomplish the particular task. I think that is it's going to be interesting to see how these things will uh, unfold in the months to come. I
Mhm.
know the conversation itself is like shifting from the prompt engineering aspect to a context engineering, right? I think this is
Mhm.
where things are changing quite fast and quite rapid.
Absolutely.
Uh, so at this, yeah. So what is the other interesting category that uh, really made you think that in the month of April that a lot of things have happened? And how do you?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would go back to what I mentioned with AI economics. It's one of our categories.
Hmm.
And to me, economics is interesting because it's where the rubber meets the road of real preferences and people voting with the money. So if people vote with their money,
Hmm.
I'm more inclined to take it as a salient and interesting signal over, let's say, if you just open up like your Twitter, or I don't know, I still call it Twitter. I don't like calling it
Hmm.
X, but doesn't matter, right? Like if you open any social media, depending on which people you follow, you will either hear that the end is nigh or we're just like minutes away from endless prosperity, acceleration, and abundance, right? So it's hard to keep track of what the real signal is. So for me, economics is an interesting case because people tend to vote like maybe not rationally, but with intent when it comes to money. And one of the things that I found very interesting is, and there is multiple that we can talk
Hmm.
about, but I think one that I found particularly interesting is that the prices for old GPUs are going up again. So to me, it's very clear that we are not in a demand market. We are in a market that's, let me rephrase because that might be confusing. What I'm trying to say is the economics are increasingly governed by locked up supply. So it's analyzing and understanding the supply situation, not the demand, because the demand obviously is there. It's outstripping the supply, and it's
Right.
not the stuff that like keeps the system dynamics up. It's like in a way there is enough demand. Now the question is who gets how much supply to what at what price, and how the economics play out on that front. And what that tells me is that it could be rather sooner than later that there's an inflection in terms of the pricing. Because if there's locked up supply, you have more spikes in pricing. It's like more and more demand chasing a smaller amount of flexible like supply. You get
Hmm.
more price shocks and more volatility. So that is interesting. And the question is, how will the big labs react? Will they try to push over prices for everybody? For instance, going away from subscriptions, going towards pay as you go tokenomics, where you pay for each token? Or will people like go with preferred vendors and suppliers and like essentially lock out the rest of the market? We talked about it at the very beginning because of the dynamics of how software was created in terms of like the cost structure. It
Yeah.
made sense that everybody had access to the same technology at the same time.
Right.
But now, not just because of Mythos, for instance, the anthropic model being better than might be a good idea of publicly releasing it in one go. I think that is just a very convenient story to tell when
Mm.
maybe it's that they haven't figured out how to price and monetize it in a way that is sustainable. And so we could see that all of a sudden, not only demand is chasing supply, but supply is taking off the market, even if it's
Right.
commoditized. And that would change a lot of the calculation because we're assuming everything gets commoditized. If stuff gets commoditized, the price should always come down, which it has. And I'm not saying it that we're not getting better technology for a cheaper price. But what I'm saying is if we get like the next jumps, we assume they will come at the same price point we're used to. Let's say $20 a month for an individual, or maybe $100, right? If you get the Max Super Pro, whatever subscription, maybe we'll have to contend with subscriptions that are 500, 800, or $1,000 per month. Um, and that would change a lot for a lot of people. And still, for most rational actors, it would probably be a wise decision to buy into it. So it could flip the dynamics of the market. I'm not saying that's already the case, but
Mm.
it's easily imaginable that it could go in that direction. And yeah, so that is something that really was interesting. Maybe one more thing about AI economics, but also it can be, let's say, about compute and platform or orchestration and platform. One other aspect that I found very interesting, we're so focused on AI.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how CPU constrained we were, but
Yes.
agents are using more and more CPU power. And the ratio, at least what experts in industry said, was 8 to 1, right? If you
Mm.
have an AI that, let's say, something like ChatGPT, and I'm using it in a sense like Google is a stand in for search, right? Like you talk to an agent, and if you talk, let's say, for a certain while, the amount of CPU versus GPU, so accelerated specialized hardware for AI versus the standard that is running in every computer and laptop was 8 to 1.
Mhm.
But now, if you're coding, if you're using agents, if you're like all the workflows that are important for productivity, we see that all of a sudden, like the
Yeah.
ratios keep
Changing.
coming back, right, to almost like parity.
Mhm.
And that then explains, for instance, why suppliers like Intel, which weren't the darling of the stock markets in the last, sorry, 10 years, all of a sudden see a massive like pop in
Yeah.
their
A massive
valuations,
spike. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I also like noticed that I think glad that you brought up this point about the subscription models, uh, like whatever this $20 subscription or $100 subscription, whatever happens with these models. I think even though it is a monthly subscription, you are always, depending on the usage and depending on the model that you are using, you are, I think I've noticed that you can hit this token usage limit within a particular day or within a particular few hours, and you keep getting messages from whether this is anthropic usage or depending on the model that, hey, you have reached your limit for the day or for the next few hours. That was, I know that was a new thing with this new models that came out, right? I think so. You're
absolutely.
you're working on some aspect or some particular model, and you think that okay, I've locked in, I have bought into this subscription, but my usage is now restricted for the next few hours. So, any thoughts like what do you think? How do you think this is going to evolve? So, I know you were saying that it. Uh, I think that is where you are saying about the supply is getting restricted, right?
Exactly. At least that's one of the interpretations that could be correct. Um, and because of the shifting dynamics from capex to opex, could be the case that supply is taking off the market, that we
Mm.
never see it. And I'm I'm not sure like where the market is heading, but I feel like the most interesting news in the next couple of months will be about who comes out with what pricing and what engagement model, and whether people will go like, hey, we believe locking in demand is important,
Mhm.
just like it was important during the platform era, right? Whether it was Facebook or like any of the platforms that wanted to capture and aggregate as much of the demand as possible because they had a flywheel effect. And to some extent, we see that with the coding tools. You need the feedback loop. What kind of code suggestions are used, like how people want to use that technology to improve it. But the question is, how much is it worth? And at what point companies will opt out into different modes of operating
Mhm.
and pricing their products differently. And I think that's what I'm waiting for. I think that the seat-based pricing model is going to die. I think if you are selling work and not a tool and your TCO is high, you're not able to run with a seat-based model. So that I feel like would be a very safe bet. But I also believe there's something else that might can happen, and I'm very curious. So I'm watching that space closely.
Yeah, well, I believe I'm pretty sure that the space of AI economics is going to evolve quite a bit in the next few months and quarters, and only then we can know how things are going to be played out. Yeah, I
Mhm.
know. What is the other category, or what are the other topics or on top of your mind for April, the month of April, that you would like to kind of highlight?
I think I will let the others pick their favorites. I would
Mhm.
say if the audience want to be at the bleeding edge of where it's currently going, other than how the incentive systems fall out and or play out, the one thing where I'm looking in terms of the categories or topics is the harness engineering. That is, we talked about at the very beginning, how you can bend the arc of light of the AI model performance into something that can create business relevant outcomes. And this harness engineering to me feels like the operating system. So, what the operating system is for the CPU, the harness engineering is for the GPU.
Mhm.
And that's where I feel a lot of innovation, interesting conversations, and people are very quickly iterating and creating new stuff. So if people from your audience want to be on the bleeding edge of where interesting conversations are happening, I think harness engineering for the next couple of weeks is or months will be where it's at.
Beautiful. I think we'll leave it at that, and I will continue the conversation with the others. And as always, glad to have you on our podcast, Lucas, and great
Well, thank you
insights.
for having me. I will.
All right, welcome back to our monthly forum, or a monthly AI news forum. Like always, we are excited. I'm actually excited to meet with you folks to discuss on what happened in the month of the just past. So again, we had to do it in two parts. The first part I've just recorded a few hours back with Lucas. He's in the other part of the world. So welcome on board, Manjeet, and welcome, Sesh.
Yeah, yeah, happy to
Hey,
be here. It's
yeah, good to be here. Thank you so much.
So
last last day of a month, right? April
last
30th.
day.
It's when we are recording this, and as usual, the 30 days flew by for me.
True, true. And a lot of these results have been coming up. So the quarterly results, and we see an uptick. And let's get into some of those. I know we started getting across into six different buckets or six different categories. Like I'll just quickly bring it up, but then it's up to you where or how you want to start with. Applications agents is one bucket which you have been talking about. Then we
Mhm.
have platform orchestration, and then context, tools, and data, which is also getting interesting. Then we have the bucket of models and compute. Then the bucket of trust, evals, observability, and then
Yeah,
finally the AI economics.
yeah,
So
right.
yeah, we'll start with you, Manjeet. I think how did things go by for you the last 1 month, and what do you think? Which bucket category you want to start with?
Let's start with money first, right? What's happening there? And we don't need to go too deep. I'll just give some of the incremental things that I've noticed. Uh, so Q1 results are stronger than usual across the board, especially the big companies, right? Whether it's a model company and otherwise in general, like the enterprise Q1 is a little bit of softer compared to Q4, and then and the primary reason were people like this budgetary cycle. They try to finish their budget in Q4, but surprisingly Q1 across the board. If you look at the cloud, all the top three cloud results, and Google Cloud has grown much faster. So I think 60% growth. That they like the how fast they climb from like the 20 to like the 60. And for me, if I try to connect dots, it's because of their kind of vertical stack, right? Because uh, they own both kind of the model plus hardware plus, right, the app layer. And that is the synergy is really helping them. And I think from the unit economic standpoint, I think they will have the better results. Although they didn't kind of give, but it's very kind of explicit in there. So is the funding. I mean, the all the VCs they follow. So just in Q1, I was looking at his VC newsletter, and like 300 billion were poured in
Mm-hmm.
across 6,000 startups. So that was, I'm like, okay, that was big ones plus the small one. And then you may have seen, right, the how fast Anthropic grew, right, from the surpassing $30 billion and so on and so forth. So that's on that side. Other is as we talked in the previous pods, it's like, hey, 2026 will be the year of adoption, and I think we had a great start in Q1. I'm seeing a lot more traction on agent
Mm-hmm.
adoption. In fact, Gartner also turned around. Now they are saying these agents will be adopted by 40%, which is, I think, a very healthy number. Like less like 4 or 5% to jumping to 40%. Let's see how we will end the next 2 3 quarters. But that's, I think, the overall. And then all these signals is what leads you to more, the infra part, more investment in infra, and then so it's like everybody is ramping it up. And the more one common line that I noticed in all the earning calls is like, hey, we are limited by number of these GPUs, or people might use different numbers. Like, okay, I wish we could have scaled faster because their
Mm-hmm.
backlog, their order backlog is pretty long. Whether you look at AWS backlog or Google backlog.
Right, right. Great. So coming to you, Sesh, I think we want to continue talking in
Yeah.
this bucket, the category, the AI economics, maybe subscriptions, and then the way I know the things are changing quite a bit. I believe the way you are monetizing is kind of changing. If I could give an example, like the usage, I think when we had this monthly usage of $20 or whatever the subscription package, but it doesn't mean that you have this $20 and then you keep using these models for some time. You get a message that, hey, you're out of limit, you have to wait a few hours or something like that. So yeah, over to you, Sej. I think you want to talk something around the economics
Yeah,
part, like what Manjit was mentioning.
yeah, that's interesting because since we're talking in the context of economics, um, so it's true right now. We over time, um, there was actually a very interesting talk by uh, Dylan Patel.
Mhm.
It was pretty interesting, very insightful, and this whole notion of where I'll pay for the value is completely going away because everybody wants to adopt the latest and greatest model. So basically, the price-based self-selection is going away because they see they're just looking for an value extraction story. They're not worried about cost to value story anymore, right? So that's what he highlights, right? Which is it's close around what you're talking about as well. And even in the companies, if you see, I mean, it's not a new phenomenon, but it's a very recent last few months. Token economics as a utility has become it's a buzzword. Everybody is speaking about it. AI computers kind of matured into like kind of a metered utility similar to electricity.
Mhm.
Companies now track token spend as a primary variable cost center. It's making a fundamental shift to from fixed IT budget to like
Right.
consumption-based commodity model, right? Which is what you were alluding to. So again, these two are interlinked in the sense like nobody wants to be even one version below the latest model, which is very different from the software world where people are okay. In fact, nobody wants to adopt the latest because they'll work. But now,
What used to matter a lot.
yeah. So now and then token spend is becoming it's kind of an allowed variable cost, right? So and of course tied to this is of course going to be the outcome based pricing because you may choose to adopt the latest model, but over time, if the marginal value of using that is reducing, then they're going to switch because that's where the orchestration layer of models is coming. So it's kind of nicely coming together. And of course, we are seeing some real world applications with rise of agentic commerce and all of those things. So yeah, it's a combination of the economics driving value and value driving economics as well.
Great, great. Anything
Yeah.
else you want to add, Manjit, to this category or to this topic?
Yeah, no, I think the one thing, if you look at more specifically how people are pricing, right in the agent force world, we did switch went to this is our fourth sort of pricing iteration, and then I saw and HubSpot also pretty clearly like okay, no monthly user license. If you use our, let's say, customer service product, if it resolves 50 cent per case resolution. If you use, let's say, a lead qualification type agent, $1. And I think that's for the consumers, it's a great, but I think it's the sad part, a little bit of the is these margins are thinning from like the
Right,
SaaS
right,
provider end. So that's putting a lot of pressure, and customer have more choice than before. So uh, I think that's how the AI is. In AI, yeah, you can't have those 60, 70, 80% margins.
right, right. Let's get into the interesting topic, right, about the models. I know we all talked about maybe I think who wants to start? I think Manjit, you want to start that about the topic of Mythos, right? I think which was released
Right.
from I think the models and compute category. I know there was a lot of buzz, a lot of things went around, and uh, what is your take on that? I think now uh, Anthropic came up with this, and now they say that okay, we are not going to release this model. We are going to release it to a fixed set of customers or partners, and then we are going to do a little bit of inferencing and training and all with that. And then, of course, I'm pretty sure OpenAI and Gemini, they are
Right, right.
pretty close by. So, what's your
Yeah.
take on this category? It's kind of evolving pretty fast.
Yeah, I think two things. So one is rather than a general purpose model, my guess is some of these labs they're looking at, hey, what are three top big markets, and of course, security and cybersecurity is one of them. And my observation is this one is more tailored and tuned for those cybersecurity type of use cases. It's a huge model. It's sort of 10 billion parameter.
Right.
Uh, and what that means is that it'll be way more costlier or more slower, but then we'll be able to solve or find those things that I would say the previous generation of model will not be able to do. Um, but I think the my guess is not sure if the architecture is different. Feels like the architecture is still sort of, these transformer. Right in the previous discussions, we were talking like, hey, what will be the other architectures to have a step function change? But looks like it's just you can still do a lot at the sort of pre-training and then providing more label data and then right the more compute and bigger models. Uh, I really want to try it out whenever right, I was asking like, hey, it's available, and but looks like they're piloting, so they
Yeah.
giving it to. I think yeah, some enterprises also have the access in limited capacity, and I think that's the right way to go because there's no way that Anthropic can test it by themselves and then give it as a GA release in so many people's hand and then like
Yeah.
sometime this it might become a one-way door because by the time they will realize people will already distilled it and will create the smaller models and whatnot, right? Because these things move pretty fast. Uh, and then yeah, so I think that I'll see the similar thing will for I'm expecting one for healthcare
Hmm.
like not as a cheap chat GPT wrapper, like because if I look at this two or three product, in fact, Perplexity also launched, Perplexity for Health. But those are to me is a little bit of a wrapper on the
Rapid.
existing
Yeah.
model versus the 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 pre-training itself is more targeted to one sort of vertical domain and then right so I think that's what we'll have for these healthcare and then I think cybersecurity is big one and then yeah a couple of those it's a big market, these are trillion-dollar markets, so I think uh, uh, so the funny thing is anytime these announcement happens the category of public stock market, all the vendors drops by 10 like 20% sometimes.
Pretty.
Like, hey, like let's see. And so a lot of it is, I think, yeah, the fear. So let me touch on that. And I think that's I'm pretty
Yeah.
convinced that most of these AI labs, their marketing strategy is create fear. Specifically, Anthropic is like very clearly, or fear is
Pattern, right? I think they have
always
this pattern too.
yeah, John, because it's the fear sells. You don't need to,
Yeah.
do any ads, anything that you post you put out from a credible account. And if it is about fear, you don't need to buy SEOs and others, and that'll just people will share. And I think that's what no, what's happening. And then so I hope this some of the other ones take the reverse side of it, but I don't see that taking like, oh, yes, they talk about in the different pods and others,
Yeah.
but most of them, their marketing ones are. And then this new model came out, right? Even the incremental model, right? We have the Opus 4.7, then GPT 5.5, and a couple of others. They seems better, but then I think they are also the same, like costly. Just like any new iPhone is 30% more, sort of. Uh, but Opus feels, I mean, it eats up my tokens so fast. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
It eats up so fast. Yep. Yep. But I
yeah,
think,
and
like
then
you said, fear is one factor. But again, we do not know if it is really fear or is something really happening there. But I think we'll have to
yeah.
wait and watch. Coming
Two
to you.
funny stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, two. Let me add two funny
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah.
Like in the here, like the fear. Speaking to the fear, and then Shesh, you can add. So one is because see the company grew, and then people like okay, AI will take over the world. Uh, some of the investors, one investor came and he was like, "Hey, I have my 13-acre land. Can I trade it for your equity to
Equity.
enter?" Right? Because and that to me is like people are willing to like, hey, this is the total land I have, you take it and give me some of your stocks. It is yeah, optimism slash fear slash I think the combination of those because right. Um, they and then people like let's see. I mean, some of these companies will hit IPO market.
True.
I think it will be an interesting. I'm expecting the the bubble chart for first couple of months. How far it can go, you never know. And then some, the reality will also hit because the truth is the cost to serve these inferences are still very, very high.
Very high. Yeah.
And it has come down, but overall, the usage has grown so much.
Yeah.
Google Cloud is processing 19 billion token a minute. And if you look at that, even if the cost has come down, the usage, we all are using so much, right? That's where I think, Ceci, you're saying, like, I can't can't turn off. Like, hey, this agent may be waiting for me. Let me go and click, even while you are having lunch or dinner. Like, my agent is waiting.
Yeah.
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 That's actually
So what's
interesting.
your take? Yeah.
More
Yeah.
like a tidbit. Maybe you guys know this already. Uh, when you use Cloud Code, there is this option of slash by the way.
Yeah.
Have you heard of
Yeah.
it?
Mm.
Yeah.
Slash by the way. That's a pretty neat thing because I had some process running yesterday and I forgot I had it running, but it was when I came back, it was still running. So I wasn't sure whether it's kind of going in a loop. So I just did a slash by the way, and then I said, when you finish this, go ahead and do that. Then it comes back. It actually splits my terminal, right?
Mm.
Which is amazing. And then it
Right.
says, yeah, your commands are actually in process. I've already executed five of the seven. I'll come back to you when I'm done. That's like, wow, that is
Yeah.
so human.
Yeah. No,
So it's good.
I think they really cooked up this whole harness. Of course, the model is good, but
Right.
specifically their model plus their Cloud Code harness is that's where you feel a lot more magic. Versus if you use Opus and others like in there, you see the difference. That's what I observed. So and yeah, and we can talk about harness later, Raghu, but that's I think the to me see a little bit of winning formula and then a learning loop on the top.
Right. Right. Yeah. So over to you, Sesh. I think what do you think about this category, the models
Yeah,
and compute? I think this is where
yeah. Since we
you
talked
can.
about mythos,
Mhm.
I think the reaction. I mean, ultimately, the debate centers on the balance between using mythos as a defensive tool to secure systems and versus existential risk that its capabilities could be used for fraud, cyber abuse, other malicious activity, right? But that's more like, but then the reaction almost felt like how the nuclear proliferation discussions happened, right? Because they were starting to talking about they were deploying having a deployment debate whether they should only open it up to certain companies while not for others. So that whole cycle kind of, you can see a strong parallel between nuclear arsenal and now in the AI world they're trying to restrict the access, so that even if even if this power goes in, it goes only to certain people. That is kind of interesting, which also could be exactly what Manjit, you're saying, right? It may not be as harmful, but just the fear,
Fear. Yeah.
they're kind of circulate as a marketing tool. So it was interesting to see. Um, on Other than that, I think I mean the interesting part, I don't know, there were probably many interesting things about in the Google Cloud event. I'm not sure if anyone,
The Google Next event, right? Yeah.
yeah, Google
Yeah.
Next event, right? So I believe I mean, they launched a new hardware chip, right, which is significantly less in terms of which is expected, of course. It's significantly less. The numbers were extremely competitive to the point where you can run very high performance models on this low expensive chip. So that I felt was a pretty interesting kind of keynote from Thomas Kurian when he spoke about it. Um, the I think the chip's name I forget, KV Cache, right?
Right.
Where they really broke the ceiling on some of the handoffs between model eval and then API calls to almost sub 0 second. So you kind of it almost opens up the new Moore's law in AI compute. So that I felt was pretty interesting.
Yeah. No, I think cache on Google, I've been following like which model has the better caching for
Mhm.
the same queries, right? Let's say if everybody's asking just like the same, all the news and other scenarios and whatnot, right? Uh, for the most part, they are sending it as a fresh query to, even if exactly the intent is the same. Like, why don't
Right.
you serve kind of in there unless there's a difference in the intent. So and Gemini has that in their architecture from the beginning, and now they're optimizing on that, and that's what I think that says, yeah, is will drive very like just like Google search results. You type it and boom, right? The response
True.
comes back.
True.
That's where you drive a lot of the CTS down, because 50% of the volume is same thing we all ask.
Right. Right. Let's now pivot and go to the other category. So, Sesh, what is the other category that you want to pick up? Applications and agents is also equally exciting, but it's your take. What is the next category you want to pick up, discuss?
I have to remember what are the other categories, but maybe we can talk about trust. I saw your
Yeah.
comment about in your comments you had a
Trust is becoming infrastructure. This is what I was
yes,
talking.
yes, yes. Maybe we can talk about trust, right? So in the context of trust, right now, of course, agent observability is pretty a hot topic. I think Manjit knows this more than any one of us. But there are lots of this ghost machine uh, tracker capabilities. I know recently a consortium of startups they launched what is called the quantum trace capability, where it can kind of run in parallel as the model is evaluating, and then and as it maps out all the non-linear decision pathways in real time, and then prevents any calamities in real time. It's almost like um, designing a car that never crashes versus having an airbag in the car, right? So I think that agent observability and then building to that with ghost in the machine tracker capability is kind of a new development uh, from maintaining trust point of view, right? So it's one thing is to invariably all the trust systems are more observability in after the incident happened, but now we are actually doing something which runs in parallel that kind of course checks, almost having a sitting next to your daughter while she's driving kind of mode, right? Preventing her
Right.
from crash. So I think that's a new evolution in maintaining trust as we move to the agentic world. I think lots of startups are kind of spawning on that space, and it'll be interesting space. Even
Yeah.
as people are fearful about AI, these kind of innovations kind of build those right guardrails that prevents it. So it is pretty interesting.
Right. Right. And then, of course, there are these, again, in this space, I think this EU AI Act and these other negotiations, they're also getting more and more messier. I think so. Things are getting a little more interesting, I should say. Uh,
Yeah, and
what would you say? I think Manjit, this
so one interesting thing happened is China. I don't think they do it, but they blocked the Manus deal that Meta was. So it's other way around, like either
yeah,
Europe blocking or US blocking. Now it's like
yes,
okay, this came from our sort of main land property, and then we will. And I don't. I mean, yeah, I think that deal is being likely to reverse. So I don't think Meta can do anything. So so it'll be interesting. I think the with more this EU Act goes in, and then I think there'll be a lot more come from EU side. You know, that's their way of whether we think it at a defense standpoint or um, and I see a lot of people like, hey, when it's China versus US and others, but I think you see, hey, everybody has their own sort of uh, and I don't think it's a matter of like the speed. Here's what I mean. If today, let's say only one country has access to the best model and those, it's a matter of 6 months,
yeah,
they'll catch up. So I don't think that people have cracked the code of all the learning from each other and kind of distilling from each other. And you can't stop that. Uh, in fact, this trial is going on, right? Elon Musk and OpenAI.
yeah, yeah,
And it's an interesting one to see. And then we'll just ask the question like, hey, did XAI train on OpenAI, model and output? And he said yes. So what that means is, okay, you are also beneficiary, right? So we can't play as like sort of a so it's interesting, and that's what it's doing, right? All is this like, okay, uh, the you release the best, and then these models can learn from each other, and then that's where the gap has reduced. And the Chinese models are showing it again and again. So that's pretty interesting to see.
right, right. So let's get into the other category. I believe I don't know if do you want to talk about platform and orchestration or applications and agents? Which one?
Yeah, the main I would say the buzzword there is some of these things are now packaged as harness, right? What
Mm,
that means is, hey, whatever the product you have, your agents or your applications or API, how that fits into your agentic workflow. If you want to build,
right.
what role it plays, and can it do the all the handoff seamlessly? Can it does it have the memory, right? And then so as a result of that, what's happening is that if a lot of personas like us, we are spending more time in Codex or Claude Code or right, Gemini.
Mm,
Um, so the need for direct API access, the need for your MCP, doesn't matter which path you take, it has increased versus building a lot of UI on the top first.
Mm.
Because for the most part, this in the SaaS category, the UI was an important part, right? I'm not sure, I remember, the even 10 years ago when I was building product, it's like, okay, let's look at the user journey and we nail it down. And on top of that, we were building product to help guide people on how to use AI, like that, where to go, where to sign up, and then you click in here. Because there were so many things into that. Now you can just ask, like, hey,
that whole thing is going away now. I think the way you interact with the system itself is going to change, right? I think it's
right.
already changing. Yep.
So what's happening? I mean, I don't know if you noticed, we announced
Headless.
headless,
That's what I was
force,
about to ask.
headless
Yeah.
agent force, and then so because it's like, hey, let's meet where users are, And the
That's a
platform.
great pivot. That's a great pivot. I think this is what we briefly discussed in the first part too. Like,
Right.
go understanding the need that there will be agents coming across, not just from one company, right? I think one firm. I think that's that. I know. I want to give that pivot. I think maybe you can continue on that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. I think the way I think about, and one of it is like there will be at least 10x more agents than a human.
Right.
And what that means is, if which means there'll be a lot more uses. If those many agents will come and then, right, access these your CRM systems or your these other system of record, that uses will grow. And then so I think some of these monetization will move into that usage based, output based, outcome based. I think the different modality. Uh, and then the pure human seat, we know that they will slowly shrink. They will not go away. Uh, and which means as a builder, as a product manager, uh, the our lens will also be, hey, probably not the UI first, all the API headless, make sure that works because it serves all the 10x, and then build UI for more carefully and more like specific scenarios, and then right, which are more repeatable, and then and probably you don't want everybody to generate their own canvases and own dashboard. So I think this dashboard and those things will continue to stay wherever you need to see right, the same thing as a big as a team and as a big company. So
Right. I
that's
think this is where I think I still have some questions. Right. I think their interaction with the systems. I know the UI, the way we interact with the system is changing quite a bit. UI as it is in the past is not going to be there, but there is no standardized way yet or identified at least, right? I think how do you interact with the system? I think it
right.
will have to evolve
Yeah.
over a period of time. Now there are different ways of how you're interacting.
Yeah. But does it matter, right? The way I think about it is, let's say we want to do it, jobs to be done, you and me, the same thing, and pick whatever platform. As long as we are able to do that job, let's say, take a sales example or customer service example, does it matter you came through step A, B, C, D versus you directly came from A, C, D? Uh, in some cases, it does not. In other cases, like from optimization and then more efficiency standpoint, yes, there is always better ways and more efficient ways to do things. But I think where we are right now is nobody care about the real sort of efficiency. It's like, hey, let's do it and let these agents run in parallel. And as long as they get your job done, I think that's where things are. But as the usage and scale grow, people will be more concerned about tokens and cost. And then yeah, we even in enterprises there'll be a lot more scrutiny and guardrails on how much you can spend because there's a lot of bad spend happening on the token as well.
Right, right. So I want to get you into this conversation of this
Yeah.
interaction, right? I think, Sej, what is your take on that? I think before we get into this, any other category or topic?
Well, I think there was a discussion on this sometime back as well, right? Because the the primary interaction is now becoming headless, which is no UI is the UI,
Right.
but humans eventually will expect systems to be voice driven. Of course, that's one thing, right? Which is a very brain dead next step, but probably the next evolution is more like the brain computer interfaces where our sensory movements should indicate what the next step that we are expecting AI to do, and then it works with you towards that, right? So I think probably the rate at which things are going, probably next year we will be using BCI interfaces to interact with computers and any of our day-to-day equipments. So looking forward to it.
Right, right. And yeah, so which other topic you want to pick up, Saish, I think before we get to the close of our conversation, I know we wanted to.
Well, on a lighter note, I I always I mean we have people who use Mac Minis and all, right. I always
Yeah,
felt it
yeah,
was more like a developer focused thing, or maybe to have extra storage or something like that, right? But there was a news item. I think there's this podcast called Morning Brew, very interesting
right.
podcast. So there was an article where they talked about there is a significant rise in Mac Mini sales in the last quarter. Apparently, it's now used as a local orchestration environment where an agent has full control over the dedicated sandbox machine via WhatsApp or some CLI,
True.
right? And it's almost like edge orchestration and keeps the agent's messy thinking process separate from the main laptop. So, and also it gives you like security peace of mind. Agent can just click around on a dedicated VM without accidentally deleting your personal files and all those things, right? So it kind of it what was interesting was I always thought it was a very developer focused product, but it has now created a new hardware category of AI home office server, right? So maybe everyone will start buying Mac Minis, even the non-technical people who have a sick who can have a sandbox where they want to do all the CLI with their cloud, but of course use the main
They
computer
want,
for
yeah,
day-to-day uses, right? So it's interesting the observation. That article didn't talk about Apple marketing it like that, but this was more like a discovery based on usage that the article was published that this has become like a new home office server and people are buying that. And all the more because it's headless, right? So,
right.
uh, so it kind of in keeping with the times. So, just interesting tidbit.
Yeah, very well. I think glad that you brought this up. I went to this claw camp, boot camp, I think last week. I think it was happening in Oakland. I think based out of OpenClaw, right? I think, yeah, exactly. This is the thing. I think people were the expensive version is Mac Mini. The cheaper version is now people are talking about Raspberry Pi.
Oh
So
yeah,
Raspberry Pi version, I think there were some pretty beautiful demos showcased with Raspberry Pi because people, like you said, people who are interested to try out things. Because for me, I started all this on my laptop and I thought like, no, I think I don't want to mess up my work laptop. And then I thought like, okay, I have to go for a cheaper version. So I need to pick it up. I think I just ordered. so so these are some of the things that are happening. I completely agree, echo with your thoughts.
yeah.
So any
Point
closing
of
remarks? Yeah,
categories.
go on. Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, and sorry, Raghu, I got to
yeah,
run, but
yeah.
yeah. So great connecting again, and we'll see you around. Okay, right.
Sure. All right, man.
So
Any closing remarks from you, Sesh? And what are you up to for what are you looking
all
forward?
I mean, it's, I think it's changing by the day, so it's interesting. What There are new kinds of conferences coming up, like it's Biocon AI. I've never heard of that before. So so it's more like of course there is vertical specific AI conferences now spawning up, which is interesting. It's gone from pure technology, IT, data, computer science to now becoming a vertical. It's almost like an appliance to every vertical. So yeah, interesting to see how things span off in the next month.
Glad. I think it's a great conversation, and we'll connect back again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Always looking forward to this.